Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for being here. My name is Peter CampoBasso, and I am going to be speaking about my summer in Washington, D.C. So we as Americans like to typically think of our nation's capital as just kind of like this, having just these big, great, grand buildings that are the center and home of our nation's government, as well as the great white marble monuments, just basically an image of greatness. What we don't think about is where people actually live. Never mind the parts that are east of the Anacostia River, home to some of the city's worst poverty as well as some of the highest crime in the nation. This street that you are looking at right here is actually part of my walk to work every morning from the metro. While it looks like a pretty normal street, just imagine it with some of the things that I used to see, which was a police presence that was previously unimaginable to me. As well as just seeing them patrolling by foot a lot of afternoons. A lot of rundown homes too. You can't really see them from this picture, but there were a lot. Also, one thing that really stuck with me was just the amount of roadkill that would be there and just left for days to rot in 100-degree weather. It could just really paint an image of this being, as someone who lived in this neighborhood for quite some time told me, that this is truly the hood. So poverty is just one of the many issues that is afflicting the city. Of all the possible solutions, though, the one that could mean the most and create the most lasting change, however, is education. But it is a very well-known fact that the public schools of Washington, D.C. are failing to educate the children of the city. What it does instead is to perpetuate the existence of two classes. Jonathan Kozol refers to these classes as those who will govern and those who will be governed. And what he means by that is the rich white elites as well as the poor service workers. Up until the Supreme Court rulings which ended segregation in public schools, Washington, D.C. ran a legally supported system of dual education for black and white students. Schools in Washington never fully desegregated. The phenomenon known as white flight is to blame for this. Rather than be forced to integrate schools, white families moved out of the city in droves and in effect had a profound impact on the demographic makeup of the city and the very schools themselves. Whereas at the end of World War II, the schools served 50,000 white children and 39,000 African American students, by 1964, they served only 17,000 white students and 125,000 black students. Part of this change is the influx of more African Americans into the city. However, the impact of this population change is that because a majority of them come from low-income backgrounds, the schools have a much smaller tax base from which to draw funding, and it became very easy for the schools to fall into disarray over time. By the early 1990s, Jonathan Kozol had also found that the conditions of the facilities themselves were including holes in walls, no doors to bathroom stalls if the bathrooms were even working, as well as leaking ceilings. This does not cultivate a strong learning environment, and even after decades of reform efforts, the schools were not showing high performance. In 2011, on national achievement tests, 8th graders in Washington showed 17% proficiency in math and only 16% proficiency in reading. These numbers are abysmal and highlight the desperate need for drastic reform efforts across the city. In 1996, one of these major reform efforts had begun. That year, the district approved the creation of public charter schools. These schools are free, publicly funded schools open to any student in a given region, in this case, Washington. They are also free of many of the rules and regulations that are put onto traditional public schools, allowing charter school administrators much more autonomy in how they run their schools. For instance, they can choose to have a longer school day. They are still accountable for performance on district-wide tests, and if they do not perform well enough, they can be shut down far more easily than a traditional neighborhood school. Some charter schools, like KIPP, are highly effective. KIPP stands for Knowledge is Power Program and is a national network of charter schools. In DC alone, there are 10 KIPP schools serving just about 3,500 students. The KIPP difference is longer school days. Students spend 35% more time in school than their peers in traditional public schools through longer school days, monthly Saturday school, and through a 3-week-long summer school program. In addition, they also require much more parental involvement as a condition of enrollment, and they also expect that 100% of their students will reach and complete college. The result of this culture of high expectations, but of also great support, is stunning. On the DC cast last year, 82% of KIPP 8th graders were proficient in reading, and 97% were proficient in math. Compared to the averages of 8th graders in DC on the DC CAS of 44% and 51% respectively, it is clear that KIPP is making a difference. In addition, over 80% of KIPP alumni have matriculated to college ever since the first KIPP middle school opened its doors in 2001. Compared to the average of 29% of students across the district, the simple numbers are a true testament to KIPP's success. While KIPP does provide a clear example of successful schools, the reform movement cannot stop just at trying to produce high numbers on standardized tests. A radically new curriculum is needed for schools to truly become the centers of upward social mobility, as well as places that teach people how to function in a democratic society. What we see now in schools is known as the banking model of education. The teacher is said to pour knowledge into his or her students' heads who are seen to be knowledge deficient. The psychological impacts of such a model mean that children develop a mindset of inferiority and lack a feeling of importance and self-efficacy. What is needed instead is constructivism. Under this pedagogical model, teachers facilitate a learning environment in which they discover knowledge side by side with their students who are co-learners in the educational process. Instead of being given material, they are critical investigators in the world in which they live. This allows the teacher-student relationship to flourish and become far more connected. According to Morcati Gordon, connectedness is the single greatest predictor of student success in any given subject. In a classroom where students are viewed as capable learners alongside a teacher, a new psyche develops. Collective group thought is valued. Teamwork is critical, and true democratic values become a part of the natural features of a student's conscience. Being taught to discover knowledge for themselves leads students to critically question the world around them at all times and to never accept the status quo. Instead of being passive receptors of knowledge who feel incapable, students develop a sense of self-worth and importance that leaves them empowered with the tools necessary to participate in the creation of a large public democracy, rather than the current system that promotes the existence of a narrowly interested and monetary-based private democracy. This public democracy has the best interests of all people in mind and leads to the creation of a just state. Our country was supposed to be founded on the basis of life, liberty, and equality. If we as Americans are truly to believe in these ideals, it should be the responsibility of our educational system to truly lead us towards them. Thank you.